Recording in progress.
Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome to utilizing the NJ Start Strong data. For those of you who are familiar with inspired instruction, you probably know that we partner with districts to support teachers and student achievement, teacher practices, and we do that in a variety of ways, and I can talk more about that at the end. So welcome to some familiar faces. To those of you who are new here, I'm so glad you could join. Check out all of our monthly webinars. They're on typically a very timely topic from what we hear from our partners. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Here's our agenda for today. Once we get this data, what do we do with it? Right, that's our topic. So we're going to want to look at trends across the classes, identify if there's any curricular gaps. Certainly, we want to use this to identify students who might need targeted support. Create flexible grouping. So I think that can be really helpful for the teachers that are here and for those of you who are not teachers to share, the kinds of things teachers can be doing to differentiate for their students. And then lastly, specific strategies or specific thoughts about differentiating lessons. Okay, alrighty. So getting into that, I want to, real quick, I'm just going to go back. I want to share a poll. Okay, this is a 2-question poll. Can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see it? No, Victoria is shaking her head no. Okay, okay, I guess I have to actually hit the word launch. So I apologize. A quick poll. How many of you received your data? How many of you looked at it? So I'm going to give you all, we have 46 attendees. I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to see if anyone else needs to be let in. Back to our poll. And at the last minute, I threw in, I don't know, for number 1, because a lot of times there's like a single point, a single point that holds the data in a school. So there may be those of you who know that you took it, but don't know if you received the data yet. And that's okay too. You'll get the same strategies. But I just wanted to get a snapshot of where everybody is, kind of get the temperature of the group. So it looks like majority of you did receive the data. Okay. And for those who received it, did you look at it? There is a lot there. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about is like, what's a good strategy to approach the data? Because there's a lot of different data points that you can look at. And this is all through the computer. So you almost want to have a strategy when you go in, as opposed to just diving into the data, because there is a lot. There are various pages and one set of data can lead you to the next set of data. And so we kind of want to have a strategy. Okay, so let's dive in. Thanks for answering the poll. Let's start out with, what does the data tell us? Individual student level information. So in a snapshot, teachers, administrators can look at the data and literally see a little like speedometer, and I'm going to show you the picture, of how much support a student needs. So are they some support, are they strong support, or less support? So we're going to find that out. At the class and at the grade level, I think this is where this can be really powerful, because you're going to get information on the specific standards and the types of items, and you'll be able to see trends. Okay, so while that's important to know for each individual student, I think it's even more powerful to be able to look at, hey, let's look at grade 6 and see where were some strengths and where were some needs. Okay, so I think that's what you're going to take away from today. One thing I will say is what this data is not going to give us, it's certainly not equal to a grade, or even can't really be related to any prior or future assessments. Okay, this is as it relates to NJSLA. There are a lot of similarities. It's the same question bank. It's the same question style. However, as we know, a very limited number of questions were asked. So that being said, you really can't compare, well, a student last year, or not last year, we didn't do it last year. The last time a student was tested, this student got the highest score. And now the student is performing much lower. That's not going to really be informative, okay? Because we can't really make those kinds of comparisons. All right. And I just want to also make sure that people understand it's also not really predictive of future performance. This is really meant to be a snapshot, formative assessment, one piece of data to add to your kind of, larger scope of the information you're collecting and your teachers are collecting. Okay. So for those of you who haven't seen the data yet, there are 3 levels of support. It is corresponding to what, again, if you look at like a prior year's NJSLA, a child who used to get a 1 and a 2, those are the kids who are now in, level 1 needing strong support. So they've collapsed the 5 categories into 3. Okay. I didn't say this before. Please feel free at any time to unmute to ask a question or use chat. Okay. Whichever is more conducive to your setting. Okay, so let's dive into what you are going to see. So this is the Start Strong support levels. It's the same for ELA and math. For science, it's a little bit, it might correspond a little bit differently using different words like proficiency as opposed to meeting expectations. Okay, still giving us that same information about if you have students that fall in the less support, I'm not really concerned about those students' performance. It's those who fell in the some support and the strong support that I want to consider differentiating and maybe intervention. Okay. All right, let's start looking at the actual data forms. So this is a sample student report. And what I love that it's super visual. I mean, literally, I look at this and know where a student fell. Okay, I am not worried about the raw score. The raw score was how the assessors could determine each level, but it is not something that's going to correlate to anything for me. Okay, I'm just worried about their support level. They're going to get one of these in each of the areas that they were tested. And you'll actually see that you can see a student's support level at the question level, which is interesting. We'll talk about why do I want to look at the question level in a few minutes. Okay, a quick question about, can I show the last slide again? Absolutely. So the last slide, Stephanie, let me know if this is the one you were meaning. Okay. At the end, I'm going to share with you the state's like a technical assistance guide. It's definitely helpful. It's not easy to find, quite frankly. It took me, even who's been doing a lot of work around this, difficulty finding it. So I'm going to share that link with you later. But these types of tables are in there. Okay. So again, strong support, those are the students who typically would be your 1 and 2s. And this is telling you, keep in mind that these are last year's standards. So for a 4th grader, I'm going to show you a 4th grade sample in a few minutes. For a 4th grader, this means if they are strong support needed category, that's demonstrating on the 3rd grade standards. So that's why I mentioned before the idea of differentiation and perhaps intervention. Okay, because if they need strong support in even the 3rd grade standards, that's going to be indicative of, their ability to perform 4th grade, especially in math. As we know, math is very step by step and builds on one another. ELA is some of the standards, most of the standards are repetitive in that we see the same standard. It's just the level of difficulty that increases over the grade levels. Okay, before I move to the next slide, any thoughts or questions about the levels of support? Okay. Alrighty, I tend to rush through, so I apologize for that. So looking back, what does this individual student report tell us? The first and foremost is the level of support. We use this for differentiation. If a teacher sees this, they can immediately decide, okay, this child is in some support. I'm going to want to set up some monitoring, right? Whatever we are doing in math in this classroom, what kinds of formative assessments am I doing to make sure that this student is on track, right? That they're demonstrating some progress since the beginning of the year. Again, keeping in mind that most of these kids, I can't say a, blanket statement, but many of these students were not in a school building regularly, right? Including my own, who is so happy to be back. Okay, and can be used for flexible grouping. And I think that's one thing I want to comment on. We will certainly want kids to be in ability groups for some instruction, right? So if our students that fell into the strong support needed, say, for example, which is this light purple, this lavender, I will definitely want, as the teacher, to have them in a same ability group to do some direct instruction, perhaps reteaching, all of those kinds of things. I'm going to also want to do mixed ability grouping, right? We want to make sure that kids have the opportunity to work with peers who may be stronger in particular skills, concepts, all sorts of things. And why am I bringing that up as being so important? Keep in mind, you may have kids who have normally in the past been very strong students, and now they're struggling. Those kids, their antenna is going to be up. Like, what's going on here? Why am I in this group that's sitting with the teacher? Okay. And I can speak from experience from my own, one of my own children, that can be as equally as, an impediment, when kids are feeling like, what message is this sending? Is this telling me that, I need help? I need help in everything. Do I, am I not good at this? I think we want to set the tone for kids that, wow, we had what a crazy year last year. Like, you all lived through something, that nobody else has lived through, and your parents didn't even live, through it as a student. And so this year we're going to do all kinds of things to help everybody kind of get back into school mode. So we really want to make sure we're combining that social emotional piece and setting those expectations with students. Okay, let's look at what else we can learn about each individual student. So this is one report that you are able to access. Hold on, I just want to see. So Cheryl's asking, what exactly is the graph telling me? Questions 0 to 7. Strong support. No. Okay, let's go back. I'm glad you asked that question. I'm so sorry. I'm making an assumption here. Okay, let's go back to this. This is one person, Cheryl, this to everybody here. This is a raw score. These are not questions. Okay, so this just means that if, let's say, there were, in most of the math tests, there were between 18 and 20 questions asked. This is not telling you that they answered, that they need support in a particular question. This is saying, out of these, if I could read this graph well, let's call this maybe 11. Yeah, there's the 11 right above it. Okay. All right, Michelle, you're doing well here. That they answered 11 out of the 20 questions. This is not giving you any information about particular questions. So Cheryl, I'm glad you brought that up, because as we get to the next few pieces of data, the next few forms, you'll see how you can get more info about the questions. This is just like a snapshot. Okay, see what other questions. Okay, great. All righty. How long are the reports available? So Geraldine, I'm assuming that you're meaning, are they immediate? So we were told that they're immediate. I have not heard anything that you will be, closed out of your report. So the student level feedback, that form I just showed you on the page before, from what I was told, was supposed to be same day. Does anybody have information that that is correct? I see Cass, you're shaking your head. Okay. The other information, we were told it was going to be a quick turnaround. And when I pressed on that, I heard 7 to 10 days. Now I'm going to ask you to unmute anybody who did take it and did receive their data. Was it about a week or so that you received your reports?
Yes.
Is anybody?
It was pretty quick.
Pretty quick. Okay. So that's what I've been hearing, about a week to 10 days. So Geraldine, you should, based on when you took it, be able to go in, and at the end, when I share that link with some of the technical support pieces, there's some direct information for like your testing coordinator to be able to access, step by step, how do I access? Because I wasn't going to go over how to access it. Okay, let me see what other questions. On-demand reports are available next day. And then creating your, okay, you have to create your reporting groups first. Oh, and Geraldine, you're saying nothing comes up. So maybe it's because you need to create your reporting groups. Okay. And yeah, someone just shared, Bonnie shared, the test administrator has access. So you may not have access as if you're not the testing coordinator or administrator. Okay. Okay. So I want to show you this, this set of data. Okay. This is the student performance by item. And there's 2 steps that you can take to learn more. So you can see on the left-hand side, this testing coordinator chose a particular grouping of students. So based on how you set them up, this is Mrs. Smith's class or group. If I click on this blue circle with the eye, I'm going to show you what you get. Okay. The blue circle with the eye brings you to that student, every single question, and their level of performance. So Cheryl, I think you asked that question earlier. I can literally see in order the questions. If you see here ELA, they were asked 10 questions. I can see the level of support for each question. Okay. I can also see not only what they answered, but the correct response. Okay. Very helpful in terms of if we really want to dive down into what are some misconceptions here. Okay. And then certainly the areas, the concept areas. So not only do I have the standards, but, you know, did this student, and for this one in particular, I'm not getting a great read. Like there's not a clear sign that they did more, you know, they did better in literature than they did in informational text. So I'm going to share with you the way that I would kind of try to get that information. So there's this reporting tool. Going to go back for a second. On this same readout here, if you go to where the red arrow is and says show responses, let me show you what it gets you. It gets you the actual, like the actual questions students were asked. This is interactive. So it shows you, and you can click on, it shows you the question. It shows you the empty circle means they did not respond. The check mark means they got it correct. The half check mark means that it's partial correct, right? And we know from NJSLA that students can earn partial credit. That was true here for math and for ELA. Okay, so why is this useful? You're going to see I created a document that I'm going to share with you if you're interested in how do you actually analyze this data? How can you pull it together and make meaning of it, right? So I, as the teacher, maybe as an administrator, as an instructional coach, I want to know the actual questions that groups of students performed poorly on. More so than one student, I want to know groups of students. And the reasoning is because it could be the concepts or skills or standards, or it could be the way the question was asked, right? And especially we know that we had this year for Start Strong started with 4th grade. 4th graders and 5th graders have never taken this kind of test, right? So does it surprise me if you come back and tell me, Michelle, my 4th and 5th graders did horrible? I am totally not surprised because they've never done this kind of testing. And they've also never seen the format of these questions unless they had anything front loaded by teachers. Okay, so I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I'm glad that they took it. I'm super glad they took it because it does give us information. It also gives them a glimpse into what's going to happen in spring. All right, let me pause and see what's in the chat. Okay. All righty. Instructions on creating reporting groups. Wow. Miss Jackson, you were quick. So she shared, there's definitely some nice resources here that have been shared in the chat. So check those out. I'm also going to share the document I mentioned at the end. So Dr. Lehman mentions, I would love teachers to have the role to view reports. I think that's a really important aspect, is having teachers actually view the reports, because it gives them, you know, puts the onus on them to kind of dig deep and find out more. Okay, let's go back because I saw somebody just asked a question about an incorrect response. Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. The circle, the empty circle is an incorrect response. The slash is no response. I apologize about that. That's important to know because there are kids, you'll open their data and see all sorts of no responses, right? And that's also indicative of, you know, their current situation, perhaps as someone who's not tested before. Okay, so it's good information. Thanks, Kelly. Okay, so again, good reasons to use these. I want to spend some time showing you what I really like to use and then the analysis sheet that I created. So this is the sheet that I really like to use because it gives me just a general overview of, okay, this is grade 4. So this is an entire grade. In grade 4, on these 10 questions, what are some trends that start to emerge? What can I tell right off the bat? Okay, I'm not going to ask you to do what I normally do in a workshop and ask you to respond and interact and all that great stuff. I know you have different circumstances, but right off the bat, I see that informational text, I have low numbers of kids getting positive responses or correct responses. I have high numbers of incorrect responses. The partial responses also tells me something. Okay, but this is just good general information that I might be able to make some decisions on before even diving deep into each student's score report. Does that make sense? Okay, because I think it's important when I said to you before about a strategy, about diving into the data, if you go directly to each individual student's score report and then you start looking on each individual response, you might get bogged down before you even know what the trends are. Okay, so I like to use a sheet like this, and this is called the results by question list report. Just gives you a list of, you can sort it. I have the entire grade here, tells you every question and the performance on every standard that was asked. Okay. Okay, so the kinds of things I want you to be thinking about, or your teachers to be thinking about, are what were the trends? And then how does that help us make decisions about curricular supports? What about prerequisite skills that might need to be addressed? And then any instructional considerations that might need to be put into place to support progress. And when I say that, I'm going to be more specific. Yes, differentiation. Yes, flexible grouping. But what else? What are the specific instructional considerations I would think about as the ELA instructor, as the math instructor? Okay. So here's the document I created. If you're interested in this, I will share it with you after. It has this sample, this 4th grade sample. It also has a blank one for you. But this is something that you can use with your administrative team and share with teachers, or you can have teachers do some of the work. But it's broken down into areas of strength, areas of need. And you see here that I have the actual item number. I have the concept, the standard, and a sample question. Now, if I'm going to show you the full document in a second, if I were doing this, I personally do not have access to the individual questions your students were asked. So what I did was I picked related questions. What I would do if I were you and you were creating this is I would go into that interactive piece where you can see the actual question and stick that in here. Okay. And why do I think it's important to have the question? Like I said earlier, and I'm going to share with you some here, I can tell by the question that it might have been a point of the student not being asked questions like that in that format. And that instructs me, okay, I need to start asking questions in a different way. It could also reflect the vocabulary that I'm using, right? If I've never said the words character trait to my students, if instead I'm saying to them, how does the student act, right? I'm sorry, the student, how does the character act? That student is not going to know how to respond to a question about character traits. Okay. I started with 4th grade as the sample because this is 3rd grade standards. This is the earliest that students were tested, and I wanted you to have a sense of what they were being asked. Okay, let me see what kinds of questions we have. Okay, so a few people saying they're interested in this. Super. Okay, so let's go through this. So this is what the strengths. I picked the top 3 for same thing for areas of greatest need. Okay, and just I forgot to mention, you can see that even though these are our top areas of strength, I still only have 38% of kids getting this correct. Okay, so that in and of itself is tells us something. But so I'm going to come back to this slide in a minute, but you can see 38% got that question right, 41%, those were the top 2. Here are the 2 lowest. So these are the 2 that were the areas of greatest need. 87% got this question incorrect. Item 7, 79% got this incorrect. Okay, so I'm going to just for a moment talk about my conclusion that I drew as to why these students may have gotten these incorrect. Okay, if you notice, this happens to be a reading literature question. And you might say to me, well, Michelle, look on the other slide, they got that reading literature, same 2 standards. They got it correct. It was a strength. So how can the same standard present as an area of strength and as an area of need? And I will tell you why, or at least why I think. Okay, this is it is a straightforward question. So assuming the kids know what character traits mean, and this is also a video, and video can support students answering questions, I would, venture a guess that that's why the students did well on this question, same standard, as on this next slide, same standards. This is actually referring to, if you look at standard 3.3, describe the characters in the story. That first part is where, as teachers, we tend to spend a lot of time. The second part of this standard, explain how their actions contribute to the plot. I think that's a question we ask less frequently. So look at the sample question. Will a student automatically know, oh yeah, I know how to answer this. They're asking about, character traits, their motivations, their feelings. This is not a straightforward question. Why is it important to the story? So what does this tell me? It tells me that I want to make sure as the teacher, I'm not only assessing the first part throughout my questioning techniques, throughout my formative assessments, throughout group activities. I want to make sure I'm also assessing that second part of the standard. And I want to ask it in a variety of ways, right? So let's say I ask the question, tell me a character trait of Curious George. I also want to then get into this part too. Why is it important to the story that Curious George did X? Okay, does that make sense by a show of hands or even shaking heads or whatever, what we're really getting at? And so this is why this data analysis is so helpful, because it really helps us see, okay, what else do I need to be doing? Okay. And I also want to point out, this is not just reflective of the NJSLA or Start Strong. This is a reflection of that this standard needs to be assessed in multiple ways. Okay. All right, let's jump down to item 7. It is a reading informational text, and 79% got it wrong. I'm going to venture a guess. Again, I could be wrong, but if you notice, it's asking a vocabulary question. I'm right over here, part A. What does the word harsh mean? But look at part B. It's asking them to choose 2 sentences, 2 best pieces of evidence, right? So again, these are 4th graders, have not been tested before. Has that ever been an area of focus? I know that teachers, I think, when I go into schools, I see teachers do a very good job of teaching kids how to go back into the text, right? But do we talk about, okay, in your groups, I want you to talk about, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of evidence, and I want you guys to talk about which is the best piece of evidence. Okay, that's a really important skill, not just for ELA, also for math, also for science, because it's a mind shift from back in the day when there was one right answer. right? There is no more one right answer. Students have to be able to justify their answers. They have to be able to say why one is better than the other. Okay, so that would be a reasoning that I would, venture to guess that maybe why this was a more difficult, more challenging question. Okay, it could also be the passage. We know that informational text in general is, trickier for students. Okay, I want to just show you the document before I share this next slide. So this is what it looks like. And like I said, I can share it with you. I created a blank one, obviously. So you can fill that in as a team or as an individual. I have a section so that you can kind of start thinking about groups, and you can do this as a grade level. And I can tell you about a little bit more about that in a minute, but you could also do this as a class level, that type of thing, either way. But the questions that I mentioned before are what trends, what curricular supports, what prerequisite skills, and what are some instructional considerations. Okay, so here's the sample that I was just showing you with the sample questions. Okay, and then I'm going to show you like the conclusions that I drew. Okay, so we'll go back to, and just let me know, can you still see, do you see my slides now instead of the analysis sheet? Cass is saying yes. Okay, super. Alrighty. All right, so I filled out, based on the data that I looked at for that sample fourth grade class that I showed you, here are the trends that I thought emerged. That reading information presented more challenges. 4 out of the 5 informational text questions had more incorrect than correct answers. Okay, that to me is just like a, red flag. What curricular supports? Is informational text taught regularly in your classrooms? At the elementary level, is there work done in science, in social studies, in the upper grades? 50% after 4th grade, 50% of what is taught should be informational text. So what do you do if your beginning of the year is mostly literature? Well, we also know that these tests eventually, not right now, in the fall, in the spring, will include text pairs. I highly recommend introducing pairing text at young grade levels. This could be in kindergarten. If we're doing something on a theme, maybe we're doing something on plants in science, and now we're reading something about that happens to have something about gardening in our literature pieces. Let's bring in and pair that text. Okay, as many ways as kids can be exposed to informational text, and think about it broadly. And if you're a math teacher, this is going to tap into you, or a science teacher. Think about ways that you can present infographics, graphs, diagrams, all of those things. Kids are going to be able to need to analyze and respond to questions. And that whole new kind of literacy we can start thinking about now. And to be honest with you, it can offer a really nice support for students. I like to present at the start of a lesson, a start of a unit, as many visuals as possible. So whether that be an infographic about pollution or primary source photos, even at the younger grades, that's a good type of literacy instruction that will support students across the content areas. Okay, so Sylvia asked about the template. Absolutely, what I'm going to ask you to do is in the survey, I'm going to send you a survey, just put in there, please send me the document that was shared, and I can do that. I can see another question here asks, are the questions ranked in difficulty? So Casey asked that. That's how it was done on NJSLA. I have not seen any indication in what I have read that they did it that way. It could be, and that they just didn't tell us that, but in all of the paperwork that I have read, I have not seen it listed that way. Okay, because clearly in NJSLA, it is listed that way. All right, what are the other conclusions I can draw? I want to make sure the vocabulary of the standards are taught and used regularly. So whether this is math, whether this is science, are students hearing the vocabulary of the standards? Okay, Are they using the vocabulary of the math practices? Are we using words like evidence and claims and argument and all of those things? That should definitely be happening on a regular basis. That's an example of one prerequisite skill. There could be many more that the data can give you kind of a heads up on what needs to be done as an immediate intervention. Okay. What are some other instructional considerations? I tried to be specific again. I know that there are math and science people here, and I used an ELA piece of data, but let's just go with it for now. Vocabulary in context. Okay, kids should be given excerpts of text, and that is what is used to instruct vocabulary. A great strategy for this is having kids number the paragraphs, right? So anything that you can give them that's a photocopy that they can write on, and they have to go in and number paragraph 1, paragraph 2 on the left-hand side. And then as you do your work around whatever you're discussing, vocabulary, main idea, central message, all of those things, you're asking kids, to go back into the text and to talk about the evidence they found. Well, which paragraph did you find that in? Or you might use that as a bit of scaffolding. Okay, I want everybody to look in paragraph 2 to help them find evidence to this question. Okay, does that make sense? As much as possible that they work with the real text and not vocabulary in isolation. Okay, for those questions on characterization that they did, I already mentioned this to you. Look at the second part of the standard. And I think that's a good bit of information for any standard, is are we assessing all parts? Many of our NJSLS are multifaceted, especially math, right? And there's multiple parts. So we want to make sure we're really tapping in and assessing all of them. Okay. Ask questions in a variety of ways. If kids have heard main idea all the time, but they've never talked about how something supports the main idea, how do the details, that's a way to consider asking a question. Okay. Last one I have is using the released items. So you can use the specific questions that kids were asked as a teaching tool, or go to the New Jersey Digital Library and use the released items. That's exactly what I did, to pull out questions and try to find those that are challenging and use those to model, how would I tackle this question? And I do it in a way that's embraces mistakes, right? I, as the teacher, model it and make a mistake. For example, if it says, provide the 2 best pieces of evidence, I model it in front of the class and I pick one bit of evidence. And I say to the students, okay, awesome, guys, we're done with this one. We picked A, and hopefully they're all yelling at me, no, we didn't pick the second piece. We want to make this engaging. I don't like to consider doing standard test prep. Good test prep is good teaching of the standards, but it's also showing kids what the questions might look like and how do I tackle it, right? It's like someone said, you would never throw kids out onto a field to play football without giving them the equipment and the rules of the game and some strategy, right? It's the same idea. Okay, so we are wrapping up time here. So what do I do next? If you are a teacher who's attending in your class, I would go back to that initial student level data, and off the bat, look at those little speedometers and identify, where are my strong support kids? Where are my some support kids? And start considering, how am I going to make my groupings? How am I going to differentiate? And then what were the questions? Are there formative assessments that I can now model after some of those questions? And I would start using that digital item library. Okay, if I'm an administrator or coach, I would start with the grade level data to try to do what we just walked through. And, let's say figure out, okay, for example, maybe our math teachers or our teachers aren't teaching math vocabulary. That might be something we want to do some work around. We might want to talk about in PLCs. We might want to do some PD around it. You might want to make a list of some things that you want to look for when you go in and do walkthroughs. Okay. And check in with your teachers and maybe look at during PLCs, everybody bring your formative assessments for this unit. And let's take a look at the formative assessments. Let's take a look at student work. That is so, so informative. If you can sit around as a group in the limited time that you have, I know, and look at student work and look at some of those common formative assessments. Okay. What questions do you have? I know this was a lot quickly, but I tried to just give you chunks of information that could be useful straight away. Feel free to put questions in chat or unmute. Okay, so I did mention, and you can still feel free to put questions in this, the Start Strong. This is called the Quick Start Reporting Guide for Educators. And I will share the link in chat because it's, even though I'm on that site all the time, unfortunately, there's multiple sites. That's the problem, right? There's Pearson, there's the state DOE website, there's different sites. But this had a lot of those charts that I shared. Okay, this says everyone in waiting room. No, we want everyone in meeting. Okay, so here's the link to this guide. This does not include that analysis sheet. That's something that I created and can share. Does the data need to, a good question, does the data need to be cleaned up prior to setting up reporting groups? So I have not heard that, but somebody here who has already looked and created their reporting groups, is that something that you had to contend with? I don't think so, but I don't want to answer. I've only seen what schools have shared with me, and obviously that was after the fact. Okay, I'm going to take that as, oh, Ms. Jackson just said yes. And Jenny said no. Okay, so Ms. Jackson, if you want to unmute, although maybe you're answering yes to a different question.
I was answering yes to that question. When you're closing out, you need to make sure that you're marking all student assessments as complete in order for the data to be accessed. And any scholar who did not complete the assessment, it will complicate the reading of your data. So you will have to do that initially.
That's a great point. I'm glad you stated that because I did hear that. And that is mentioned, I believe, in this guide, because that is something that I saw that, the testing coordinator needs to make sure that each student's assessment is closed out. Okay. What other questions? Okay, can it be imported across platforms? I do not know the answer to that. Anyone here a testing coordinator or just aware of whether you've been able to do something like that? Okay. I have not heard that happen, Sylvia. So, because I have a feeling if it could happen, everyone would be doing it. And I haven't heard that. But again, I don't want, because I'm not the person that actually collects the, does the testing. I don't want to speak to it specifically. I would say, after today, certainly look through this guide. There are other informational pieces out there. But in terms of the analysis, I think you do want to, because it can get overwhelming. For those of you who answered the question yes, does anyone want to share, how did you start? Did you start looking at grade level data? Did you start looking at individual classrooms? Anybody have anything that they want to share in terms of like how they decided to start tackling the process? Okay, well, what I'd like to do is I would love, after we finish today, I am going to share that survey, but I would love to hear from you all, or as many of you as possible, about, what you found. we're trying to really capture where are the areas of need right now, right? I mean, we know that the expectation was that kids were going to have some difficulty coming back this year. We also know that, social emotional is really, really important. And so we want to make sure that kids are getting the attention and building routines and building community and all of those things. But I would love to hear from people what they found, what areas of support they found their students needed. And again, we are always here to support you. We are working with schools in many different ways, as usual, our professional development workshops, along with our coaching. What we found last year was really, really impactful. We did a lot of work with PLCs. And so if that's something that your district is doing, but maybe teachers haven't, really taken a deep dive into the data and into those classroom formative assessments and into student work, that's something that we could always support you with. Also on your surveys, please put down for us, hey, we need more stuff about the social studies standards, or we need more of X, right? Whatever that is, we want to be able to support you. So I just put into chat for you the survey link. I'm going to ask you if you want that analysis form to fill it, to put that on your survey, or feel free to email me at any time. It's right here for you. Okay, michelle.regan@inspiredinstruction.com. And again, I'll stick around for a couple minutes if people have questions or comments, things they want to add. But I so appreciate you all attending today. I hope everybody stays safe and dry with this crazy weather that we're having. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome, everybody. Thanks so much. Good to see everybody too.